What's the good word, Josh? Your boy DKB here. So our general manager, Joe Douglas, he had a pre-draft presser or press conference, and he had one comment that intrigued me more than many of the other interesting things that were mentioned, as well as some bluffs that he threw out there. But I believe it was unsolicited. He gave us a specific number, that being 10 of the amount of draft prospects he would be excited to be on the New York Jets roster. Now, trying to dive into the mind of Joe Douglas, we know that you try to plan and replan and have a plan B, C, D, E, F for any situation that could pop up in the draft. But I think realistically, when you have a top 10 pick, you generally are going to expect that you're going to stay at that selection. So if we want to define right what those 10 players will be, I think it's not hard. This is probably one of the few drafts where we don't have any obvious needs, but it feels 100% like a lock that the New York Jets will go offense in round one, right? I don't think there's any other way you can realistically wrap your mind around the New York Jets going defense at any positions again, even though there may be some excellent talents up there when you want to think about cornerback, when you want to think about DT, trying to pair a future long-term asset with Quinnen Williams and maximize him. But it feels like the Jets offense needs to be reinforced with as many high floor caliber weapons, both on the offensive line and just in terms of passing targets that you can get. So with that said, if you want to take a look at 10 prospects, right, based on the consensus big board, what does that mean? That means when you take a look at all of the NFL draft experts, all of the NFL draft analysts, anybody that really has anything significantly enough to do with the NFL and preparing a big board, etc., this is what all of those minds collectively essentially view this draft class as, right? The lens of who's the best from top to bottom. You take a look at the 10 guys. I'm excluding any quarterbacks and I'm excluding defense. We're going specifically offense, wide receiver, offensive tackle, tight end. Tight end, and then wide receiver, if I didn't mention that, right? So you have at number 3, Marvin Harrison Jr., the wide receiver. Wide receiver Malik Neighbors at 5. Roma Dunze at 6. Joe Alt, the tackle, at 9. You have Brock Bowers, the tight end, at 10. Then you have tackles Olu Fashanu at 14, Talisa Fuanga at 15, wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. at 18, and tackles Troy Fautano at 19 and J.C. Latham at 21. You could go a little bit deeper, right? And you start to see guys like Amarius Mims. You start to see guys like Brian Thomas Jr., for example, Adonai Mitchell towards the bottom of the very end of round 1. But realistically, I think you're talking about either a slight move up, right? If somebody feels like there's a drop in a guy like Malik Neighbors or Roma Dunze or Marvin Harrison, which isn't going to be significant, right? It's not like we're going from 10 to 2. You're probably talking about us going from 10 to, at best, maybe pick 5 with the Chargers. And then in terms of trading down, which we've never seen Joe Douglas do, I think you are capping this at number 10, right? And we'll talk about the potential trade candidates here in terms of a trade down specifically. But taking a look at that list, right? Generally, people have Marvin Harrison Jr. pegged to go no later than the Cardinals at 4, or a team that trades up with the Cardinals to get Marvin Harrison at 4. Malik Neighbors is pretty much pegged to go right after him. Then you take a look at Roma Dunze. He's the most likely wide receiver to fall at 10 or to go, maybe as far as 8, where the New York Jets would say, hey, this wouldn't require anything ridiculous to trade up these 2 spots and grab him. Makes a ton of sense. Then you get into Joe Alt. He probably goes to the Chargers if they don't want to select a weapon. It's also tough to say that he bypasses Tennessee, who I believe is at 7 or 8. You have the most mock guy to the New York Jets at 10, at Brock Bowers. And then you have Olu Fashanu, Talise Fuanga, Brian Thomas, Troy Fautanu, Jason Latham. And ironically enough, JC Latham's the only player out of that, group we just talked about where I think could potentially go a lot higher than people predict. The Chargers, who are going to want to go pound and ground pretty consistently. You can take a look at a team like Tennessee, who may favor that body type and what he's going to offer. But outside of that, the rest of these guys feel like players that we could select and or trade down for to try to maximize value and recoup some draft assets at the same time. I don't think there's really any surprises with this list. I would say most likely these top 10 are going to fall in line with who you see the New York Jets selecting, right? Wide receiver, outside of those big three, would be the only one where I would say there may be a major shift, right? We had the revelation that last year the New York Jets didn't have, we're talking about the Zay Flowers draft class, who else? Jordan Addison, etc. We found out that the Jets didn't have any of those wide receivers with a round one grade, right? So maybe you get something similar here after those big three, right? A lot of varying opinions on a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., for example, who would be the only other weapon outside of Brock Bowers. We know that the Jets were high on, what was it, Myers? The tight end that went to the Raiders last year. We know we were high on him last year. Michael Mayers, I think was the name was. But nonetheless, we know that we were high on him, so it makes sense that Brock Power probably supersedes that. And then maybe you have guys that bump up for them, right? Maybe they feel better about an Adonai Mitchell than they do a Brian Thomas Jr., etc. But if we're sticking to this list and who realistically will fall into that 10 to 20 range, I think this is pretty straightforward. I don't think we're going to vary a ton from the consensus board, especially when it comes to the offensive line class in and of itself. When you want to think about trade down candidates, though, 11 to 20, you have the Vikings. I think it's unrealistic you see a trade with them. They basically have their 2 first rounders and then nothing until the 4th. They're not going to give us both, and we're not in a position where we're going to settle for a future pick and nothing else in this particular draft class, in my opinion. You have the Broncos at 12. They do have a 1st, a 3rd, and a 4th. You're only talking about dropping 2 spots. Again, this would be a situation where maybe you have to settle for a 3rd and some kind of additional compensation in 2025. Would the New York Jets be willing to do that, though? You have the Raiders with their full complement of picks in the first 4 rounds. Same thing, right? It's a tough call. I've been hearing that they do like the quarterback class a lot, but I think they're honing in on Michael Penix from the rumors that I've heard. So that's a guy that realistically can fall to them. They can also kind of hedge their bets and trade up late into the 1st if he's still not there, or potentially snag him in the 2nd still. The Saints, they only have a round 1 and a round 2 pick via the Broncos for them. Tough to see them really moving up with the situation they're in. They really need to try to maximize the picks that they have and potentially look for a trade down option themselves. Although it is worth mentioning, they bet things on Trevor Penning last year. He hasn't fared out well at all in year 1. And then you have Ryan Ramczyk with them, who's dealing with some significant injuries. So they might want to try to go and secure whoever they view as the best 2nd or 3rd tackle option in this class, but probably unrealistic. Then we have the Colts. They have their full complement of picks in the first 4 rounds. They've been connected with us before, right? Apparently there's a heavy interest in acquiring Brock Bowers. It's tough for me to think that a team, when you want to talk about, generally speaking, everybody is devaluing the tight end position, at least in terms of taking a guy in the top 10. Tough to think that they would move up. Also, probably wouldn't get their 2nd rounder. You're taking a look at a 3rd and maybe something additional. Seahawks, again, probably not moving up. I think the Jaguars would be another solid spot, right? They don't have did the Jaguars? I think they went and no. They lost their wide receiver, right? So right now they're not looking at anybody significant enough in their wide receiver room, right? So maybe they want to go up. If there's a Roman Dunze on the board still, maybe you can see a situation where you pry a second rounder away from them. I've talked about the Bengals before. Maybe they want to go up and secure their right tackle of the future to go ahead and create the best bookend tandem potentially in the NFL. The Rams, we know that they like to get aggressive in free agency. Maybe they translate that to the draft. And the Steelers, I think it's unrealistic. We see them move up. So I would probably say the most realistic trades here would probably end up being the Colts if that Brock Bowers interest is real, the Jaguars, or the Bengals and Rams, right? I think those would be my top 4 teams where we're dropping down into a great range to still be able to go out and grab somebody like a Troy Fautano, who I really, really like. You'd feel better about maybe still being able to grab a Fuanga at that point and a Marius Mims if you want to get really crazy. So I don't think that's too far-fetched. But ultimately, let me know what you guys think. Is there a top 10 prospect here? Do you think this coaching staff and front office will really be locked into either at 10, or if we do want to go and trade down that I didn't mention, or anything else? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.